It was really sudden. Like she was 10 years younger than me, and we always thought that she was going to have to bury me. Is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it's probably done more to restore my faith in humanity than anything else that's ever happened, just because it's just been like, wow, we are really lucky. In spite of this terrible thing happening to us, to our family, to our extended family, like I still, I mean, I can go out and be hanging out with a group of, big, burly, grizzly fly fishing guides, start talking about Lene, and these guys will be boo-hooing in tears, because it's just she really had a huge impact on so many people. So just seeing that just makes me realize, like, okay, we're going to make it. We're going to be okay.
Welcome to the Storied Future. If there's one word that describes my guest today, it's got to be joy. He's had a remarkable life from his early days as a kid discovering fly fishing through a book at the library at a time when almost no one fly fished, to working at the local fly shop, to becoming the frontman for a highly successful band. Nirvana actually opened up for them. Great stories about that in the episode. But when we met last year, I was saddened to learn that his wife had died very suddenly the month before. And so while we cover his journey today, really my goal and my hope with this episode is that it's a celebration of his wife, Lene. There's going to be some laughs, there's going to be some tears, but I was really struck by the joy that he brings to the conversation and that he brings to life on the other side of grief as he's navigated that. So let's dive in.
Okay, so I am Alvin Dedeaux. Correct pronunciation is probably Dedeaux, but that's how we say it in Texas, and a lot of other locally, regionally mispronounced names and words. So Dedeaux. I am in Austin, Texas. I own and operate and work for All Water Guides, which is my guide service. I started in 2011. And we are an Orvis-endorsed fly fishing guide service based in Austin, but we fish all over Texas, mostly Central Texas and the Texas coast. I've been in the fly fishing business since the early 90s. I used to work at and then eventually manage the fly shop called the Austin Angler, which a lot of people would remember from an ancient "They Don't Take American Express" ad that was played during the Super Bowl in like the late 80s that kind of put the place on the map. It's been a ton of fun. Like I said, scary at times because there was no blueprint for this. And I was just kind of making it up as I went. But looking back, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I don't think I would do anything different other than maybe starting sooner.
I mean, you've got to have some epic, crazy client stories or just disastrous days. Is there one that comes to mind?
Oh, man. I have one, yeah. I mean, I got a few, but this one pops to mind. So it was in Colorado. I was fishing with this doctor from Houston, and we're doing just a half-day float on the Colorado River. And the doctor's wife, I can't remember either one of them's names, but we're nameless in these stories anyway. But the doctor's wife said, "I've fished with him all over the world, and I've never landed a fish." I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, I've hooked plenty of fish, like Argentina, Chile, but I've never actually got one in the net." And I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah, really." So I was like, "We'll see what we can do about that." So we're floating along, and she hooks, maybe a 8-10-inch brown, fights it, jumps a couple times. We get it in the net, and she's like, "Oh, that little guy's cute." And I was like, "Yeah, but you landed it." She's like, "Oh my God, yeah, it is. That's the first one." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy." So that's cool. And we keep fishing, and she hooks a really nice fish on a dry. And we're like, "Oh my God, we got to get that one in the net." So her husband's in the back, she's in the front, and she hooked the fish right at the top of a riffle, pretty big riffle, not quite a rapid, but some choppy white water. And we go into the fast water. She's in the front of the boat. And let's see, wait. The fish is on the left side of the boat. And, I'm reaching out with the net. She's leaning back the other way, trying to get the fish into the net. We're all like looking at the net. And then all of a sudden we just hear this splash. She had fallen out of the opposite side of the boat in some pretty fast water. And I'm like, oh my God. So I start back rowing and I get up to where she's at, and she's a little bit too far from the boat for either one of us to reach. So I just stick the oar out and I say, just grab the oar. I'll pull you into the boat. She reaches up with her left hand, because she's still got the rod in her right hand. She reaches up with her left hand to grab the oar. She grabs the fish. It's still on. She grabs the fish. It squirts out of her hand. I'm like, oh my God. So finally we get her over to the boat, but I can't get her in the boat. Her life jacket or something's hanging up on the side of the boat. So I just kind of pass her back to her husband. And I said, just hang on to her. When we get out of this fast water, I'll pull over. So fortunately, and we both said fortunately, she was laughing. She had a smile on her face. It wasn't a really cold day. The water was moving pretty fast, but it wasn't dangerous. She had her life jacket on. So finally, we get over to the side, and we're all kind of standing there laughing. She's soaking wet. She's laughing. She's holding the rod kind of down, and she says, and pardon my French here, but this is what she said, which shocked me because she was a very, like prim and proper lady from Houston. But she said, that motherfucking fish better still be on there. And sure enough, she gets the line tight and reels the fish in and lands it. So we're all standing there laughing. And she told me, she said, I have had 3 highlights in my life. One was getting married to this guy. She points to her husband. This 2 and 3 were having my 2 kids. And now number 4 was landing that fish.
That is epic.
Like, yeah, it was so epic.
How long has your family been in Texas, and where'd you grow up? What was childhood like for you?
So my mom is from Texas, East Texas. Beaumont area, and then moved to Houston. If my mom was alive, she would be 91. I was born on her 30th birthday, her first kid. And so she was from East Texas, moved to Houston. My dad was from Mississippi in the swamp. He grew up hunting, fishing. He was like the next to youngest of, I think, 13 kids, 12 that survived. He moved to Houston, and that's where they met. I grew up in Houston, which back then in the late 60s, early 70s, where we lived was basically the edge of civilization. So depending on time of year, I could just hop the fence behind my parents' house and go fishing, go hunting, wherever. I mean, there were farm ponds, the irrigation canals for the rice fields that our neighborhood had been built on. So it was pretty wild being like, because it's definitely a city kid, but, there was, some weekends there'd be like a group of 6, high school boys walking through the neighborhood with rifles or shotguns, depending what time of year it was, fishing rods, and nobody ever called the cops, which is pretty crazy. But I was fortunate, because my grandparents also fished. My mom's parents, my mom didn't fish, but both her parents, her mother and father, both fished. I've been fishing ever since I can remember. Like my dad took me fishing from, I don't remember when I wasn't going fishing. I'll put it that way. And I learned about fly fishing. Nobody fly fished. I'd never seen anybody fly fish, never even heard of fly fishing until I was 11 years old. And I was reading about, because I would read anything I could find about fishing. And there was a little red a fishing book at school And there was a chapter on fly fishing. And I was like, man, that sounds cool. So I convinced my parents for my 12th birthday that that's what I wanted, was a fly rod. And somehow or another, they found one. It was a yellow fiberglass eagle claw 7-weight. I had a 7-weight level line on a Martin Click and Paul reel. And I fished the hell out of that thing, man. I mean, I tied my own flies, had to teach myself how to cast because, like I said, I'd never seen anybody cast a fly rod. But I caught a ton of fish on that thing, man. I caught bass, I caught panfish, I even caught fish in the salt. You know, I caught, I don't think I ever caught a redfish, but I caught plenty of like speckled trout and, you know, croakers, all kinds of other fish on it. And, yeah, it was, I guess, you know, it was like one of those, like, I guess that's what I was supposed to do because, you know, from the time I got the fly rod, I don't remember, I still fished with conventional tackle for a while, but I had never stopped fly fishing from, 12 years old on. And now it's like, wow, it's made my life what it is, that little, and I'm pretty sure, I've told this story before, I'm pretty sure I kept the book. Like I brought the book home so I could reread it.
I'm curious if you recall, like how, as a kid, how do you kind of thought about the future, what you were going to do when you grew up, or what was possible in the world?
I had no clue. I mean, both of my parents were very entrepreneurial, as were my grandparents. So they always had some kind of business. My mother was a school teacher, so that was like the stable paycheck. My dad ended up starting a construction company, and that was kind of ended up being like his thing. But they'd done all kinds of other stuff before that, and I never really thought about it. Like my dad did not want me to take over his business. He's like, this is too hard, man. You need to go to school and figure out how to do something that's a little bit easier. Although I did work for him during summers when I was, high school and up. And I think he was trying to make sure I knew that I did not want to do that because he didn't take it easy on me because I was the boss's kid. It was harder on me than anybody else probably. So they just both kind of instilled that work ethic. I remember later, my mom was a lot older, maybe even after my dad died, talking to her once when I was kind of first starting my own guide business and talking to my mom and saying, it's kind of tough, I'm kind of struggling a little bit here. And my mom was like jokingly said, well, I guess you could give up on your dreams and, get you a nighttime stocking job at Walmart or something. They're always hiring. And, then you could kind of struggle trying to do what you want to do during the daytime. I was like, she was obviously, like, nah, don't do it. Just, she was like, in her funny way was telling me like, it ain't supposed to be easy, just keep going. And they did always encourage that, even though I didn't know what I was going to do. I guess I knew from a pretty early age that I was going to do my own thing, which is really great because, I guess seeing my parents do their own thing, and they struggled. There was times when we were not doing well financially, but we were always happy, and we always had what we needed. Maybe we didn't have all the stuff we wanted, so I didn't have that fear. I didn't have the fear of failure or the need to have a blueprint laid out. Because it's like, obviously, there was no blueprint for what I ended up doing, and I'm pretty happy. So, yeah, even when I got a job, I mean, in a lot of ways, I just kind of followed whatever seemed to make me the happiest at the time. I got the job at the fly shop, just because I was hanging out there all the time, and the guy that owned the place, Larry, just asked me if I wanted a job. I was in the music business for years, and I liked going to see bands play, and a couple of the guys that were in a couple of my favorite bands asked me if I wanted to be in a band with them. I was like, yeah, sure, and I did that, and that was pretty successful. And then when I was transitioning out of that, thinking I wanted to do something else, Larry asked me if I wanted to work at the fly shop, and I was like, yeah, sure, and we started guiding just to make a little bit of extra money. And that, I guess, was the first time when I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do next. Like, this is, so I feel like that was the first time really I made a conscious decision to go down a particular path. Prior to that, I was just kind of like, that sounds like fun. I'll do it for a while, see what happens. But I didn't, before, even when I started working at the fly shop, I didn't envision myself being a fishing guide. I don't even know if I really knew that was a thing even. So I guess I've just been lucky to kind of stumble into, a few things and been open-minded enough to try. I think that's probably, at least for the first half of my life, just being open to trying stuff is probably my best attribute, just trying to be open-minded, which is something I have to remind myself of now when I'm kind of getting old and set in my ways, to just be open-minded. I saw somebody the other day that said, you don't have to say yes, because a lot of times I tend to say no, and being able to say no is great, because there's certain circumstances where I'm like, I sure am glad I don't have to do that. So being able to say no is great. But, the thing is like, you should try maybe. So I'm trying to do a lot more maybes now. And I think that's just one way to kind of keep myself open-minded and just keep my options open. Just, anything's possible if you're willing to say maybe. But if you say no, it ain't ever going to happen. So that served me pretty well.
Tell me about the music. I know that was something that your mom insisted on. I don't know if there was dance as well, but if it was, I know music was an important thing.
Yeah. So thinking back, like my mom was a musician. She played like in the marching band in college. She played trumpet. Her dad, my grandfather, played trumpet. My dad played saxophone. So I guess we had a lot of musical DNA. So, but my mother, tried to force me to do, different artistic activities. I took ballet, I took tap dancing, I took piano lessons, guitar lessons, and I didn't want to do any of it. At that time, I was into BMX bicycles, and then later on motocross, like actual motorcycles, which I guess at one point in time I was like, I'm going to be a professional motocross racer. That was my thing. I got pretty good, but never, that didn't pan out. But it was funny because years later, when I was a singer in a band, my mom thought it was pretty funny because she was like, I tried. She says, you're the singer. That's great. You're the center of attention. But if you'd have stuck with those guitar lessons, you could be the lead singer and the lead guitarist. And I was like,
Come on, Mom.
Yeah. But she was definitely, I think she came to see us once. Like my mom just did not like loud music, So she came to see us once and like stood in the doorway or something. My dad, on the other hand, was like backstage hanging out. He'd come out and introduce us.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'd play in Houston, and my dad would have something going on, and he couldn't come to the show, and I'd be backstage, and girls are coming up to me like, where's your dad? I'm like, he's at home with my mom. Like,
they're like, we're here to meet him, not you.
Yeah. I was like, what? But it was definitely an interesting time because, I was like 20 something. We made enough money to to quit our day jobs. We traveled around. I got to fish a lot because I didn't have a job.
What was the name of your band?
Bad Mother Goose and the Brothers Grimm.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the style of music? And
It was straight up 70s style funk. So think Parliament, Funkadelic, Isley Brothers, Sly Stone, that kind of stuff. It was like 95% originals, but the few covers we did were Sly Stone, Parliament, Isley Brothers, that kind of stuff. Big band, we'd have 6, 8, 10 people, sometimes more on stage. But everybody, or most of us, or definitely the people who anybody in the music scene knew about, had come from a punk rock background. So it was interesting because it was a pretty wild show. And people would say, like, if you watch the band with the music turned down, you would think it was some punk rock band, because there'd be like a mosh pit and, people going crazy on stage. So it was a very, very good time. And like I said, I was 20 something and didn't have a job. So I got to fish a lot. I fortunately was aware at the time how awesome it was. So I definitely did not take it for granted. Like, I was really happy that I could talk the guys into not, or at least say, I'm not coming to rehearsal this week. I'm going to be out in New Mexico fishing all week. I'll see y'all at the gig next Friday. I really took advantage of it. And I was really like, yeah, like, this is cool. I'm glad that this is happening to me, But I did stuff like, I quit drinking. I didn't drink. I may have drank like the first year or so, but once things like really started happening, I didn't drink. I was kind of in the whole straight edge thing because we were in, punk rock scene. So we'd go to DC to play and we'd stay at the Discord house with the guys in Fugazi and that whole scene. So I just now, like, I have some hearing damage, probably from that and from listening to loud music for years.
So I'm curious, like, when you put yourself back on stage, remembering what that was like what was it like just being the lead singer in a band? I mean, that just had to be a rush.
It was weird, man. And this was like a funny thing. A couple of things popped to mind. One was like, the more people that were at the show, the easier it was. Like, and I've heard other people say that because, like, you got a small crowd and it's like you got to convince them. But when there's a bunch of people, they're all jazzed already because they're like, oh, this is awesome. Look at all these people. So that was if there's the more people, the easier it was. The less nerves there were, the more people there were, at least for me. The other thing was and for us, we routinely play 500 or 600 people venues, totally packed, and even some over 1,000 people. But I would usually have to go maybe 10, 15 minutes before we were going to go on stage and actually get myself excited about it. Like, I could be backstage asleep and, and I'd be like, well, I got to be all hyped up when I go out on stage. But I really, a lot of times it's like, whatever, man, I would be a lot more excited about catching some fish right now. But, this is my gig, so I'd go stand in front of the mirror somewhere and get myself hyped up before I'd go out, which is funny because people were always like, we thought you were always all hyped up. And I was like, nah, not really, man. I was like
a chill guy.
Yeah. And I had a lot of people for years who had never actually sat down and talked to me in person who thought I was like some crazy guy that was going to be smashing bottles over his head or, kicking holes in walls or something. And I was like, nah, not really. Not so much. That's a character that I play on TV.
Well, there's, I got to ask you, because there's a great story you've told many times about a famous band that opened for you and then what happened there. I'd love to hear that. Oh,
yeah. There were a few of those, but that's probably the most famous one, was the Nirvana shows. And it's funny because I didn't even, at the time, I think Nirvana did like maybe 3 shows where they opened for us in the Bay Area. And I'm pretty sure that the Bleach, that first album they put out was out at that point, because they were touring around some. And I vaguely remember the shows. We played with a lot of bands. We played with a lot of really good bands too. And the Bay Area.
What were some of the other ones you played with? Like
the first time we played in the Bay Area, we were on a 3-band bill. We were in the middle, and the headliner was Primus. That kind of stuff. I mean, just like, we were supposed to do a short tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers one year. But then they had to cancel the tour and go back to LA because they had a song on their upcoming record that the record label was like, hell no. It was called I Want to Party on Your Body Parts. I'll leave it at that. The song did end up being on the record, but that tour got canceled. And just because of a lot of it was because of Tim Kerr, our guitar player. He had been like a punk rock cult hero. His whole band, Big Boys, was like probably the most popular punk rock band in Texas at the time. I read an article with Chris Cornell was talking about the first time Soundgarden came to Austin. They were like, yeah, we were thinking maybe we'll see the Big Boys while we're here. We'll see them walking down the street or something. He was talking about how people thought that they would run into all the grunge heroes when they're in Seattle. And, he's like, yeah, we felt the same way about the Big Boys. But anyway, we were on tour, and like I said, we were playing all over the place in the Bay Area, all the little college towns and stuff, and a bunch of shows in San Francisco proper. And Nirvana opened like 2 or 3 shows. And I think shortly after that was when we got a record deal. So we got, signed and got a bunch of money to make a record. And South by Southwest was coming up. And we played at the first South by Southwest, 1991 or 92. I can't remember. I think we played at the second one. But we had gotten a record deal. And back then, South by Southwest was all about undiscovered bands getting discovered. And we're like, we already got it, so we're not going to play. And the guys that put on the festival were like, oh, you have to play. You're one of the most popular bands in town. Everybody wants to see you guys. And we're like, we don't really want to. We want to just go see our friends play. And they said, okay, here's the deal. If you play, you can pick the venue, you can pick the night, and you can pick the opening bands. And so we're like, cool. We're going to play, I think it was the Cannibal Cub or the Cave Club, our former road manager, this guy, Brad First, longtime club guy in Austin. It was his club. And the 2 opening bands were going to be, first slot was going to be Nirvana, and the second slot was going to be Catbutt. And Catbutt, if you Google Catbutt, some guy wrote a deep dive into this band Catbutt, like a blog length post about Catbutt. And the lead singer, David Nobody, who was a punk rock kid from Austin who moved to Seattle, multiple stories about David Nobody, how he saved me when I got thrown out on my head from a nightclub in Seattle. But anyway, they're going to come and play. And maybe a month, it might have only been a couple of weeks before South by Southwest, Tim, our guitar player, gets a phone call from Kurt Cobain, who says, sorry, man, Nirvana is not going to be able to come down for South by Southwest. We were hoping to kind of tag along with Catbutt. We're going to open a few shows with them so that we'd have gas money to drive to Texas, because we can't afford to drive to Texas. And we were like, dang. And I can't remember, we got some other bands to play with us. Catbutt had broken up. And it was a matter of months, like maybe a year at the most. I hop in this buddy of mine's car. I had an old Memorex tape with Nevermind on it that my ex-girlfriend had sent me. She moved to Seattle. She was in a band called Dickless, which was also on Sub Pop. And she sent me a tape. She's like, this is the new Nirvana record that's going to come out. And I remember listening to it going, man, this is really good. And I hop into my buddy's car, and Nevermind, no, Smells Like Teen Spirit is on the radio. And I'm like, dude, where did you get a copy of this? And he's like, it's on the radio like 50 times a day. I'm like, really? I was shocked. I was like, I've been listening to the tape for a long time. And so, yeah, that was that particular incident, which is pretty funny.
Would have been hilarious as if you all had told him like, hey, you're not coming to South by Southwest. You guys might not ever break or make it.
Yeah. Well, we were sort of skeptical of the whole South by Southwest thing because that was not where we got our big break. I don't remember specifically where. It might have been New York, some gig there or something. We were all over the place.
And then how long after that did you kind of start to transition into, was it after that you got the job at the fly shop?
Yeah, I started working at the fly shop pretty shortly. Like I said, we got a bunch of money, made a record. The record came out, and then we pretty much broke up like right after. I remember going, we had played a show on the radio at Berkeley, and we went to Tower Records the next morning after the show, and they had our CD, like it was like the centerpiece, the main display at the Tower Records in either Berkeley or San Francisco. I can't remember which one. And Tim and I kind of Tim decided to get out. And then when Tim got out, I was like, I think I'm going to get out too. The band did continue on for another year or so with some different players, and with fully, I was, like good luck guys, I'm out, but I started working at a place called Whole Earth Provision Company or the Fly Shop. I can't remember which was first. Somewhere in there, I was hanging out at the fly shop, and Larry's like, that's what, because I was told him I was thinking about moving to Seattle. There was another band in San Francisco that needed a singer, and I was thinking about moving there, and we were just kind of chatting about stuff, and that's when Larry just asked me if I wanted to work at the fly shop. He's like, if it doesn't work out, I'll give you the best recommendation you've ever had. And I was like, well, I never had a recommendation for a job before, so anything is the best I've ever had. So that was a pivotal decision that was just kind of came out of thin air that I was brave enough to say yes to.
If you could pick one thing, what is it that brings you the most joy in life?
Well, now I would say my kids, that's just in life in general, just because I was not opposed to having kids. I just didn't ever think it was going to happen to me. And my youngest kid is 11 years old. I had my oldest kid, who's 15. I have a 27-year-old stepdaughter. So she was kind of a package deal when I got with my wife. But now that I have kids, I'm just like, wow, this is, it's kind of my anchor. I was, pretty footloose and fancy free for years, and probably would have continued to be, and, probably would have had just as a successful career in this industry had I continued to be a single guy. But I do feel like there's a lot more happiness in my life as a result of having a family, kids, and a lot more purpose as well. So that would be my overall, best thing in my life. But, relating to fishing, to my job, it really, the one thing always pops up when people ask me that question, it is the look, the feel, the vibe that I get when somebody catches their first fish or their biggest fish or a really nice fish, because that emotion that just kind of comes out of them is something that you can feel. It's totally contagious. And I have caught so many fish, and I've caught big fish. I've caught like most of the fish, like I'm good as far as fishing goes. Now I still really enjoy it, but I just don't get that same energy that somebody gets when it's like the first time. So as far as my job goes, that's probably the best thing about my job. The most, thing that I think of when I wake up in the morning and I'm going to go guide somebody. Now, just being outside, being in nature, just that whole aspect of it is pretty nice as well. But it's just that energy, that vibe, that first time, that best, that whatever that I get from my clients or my friends or my family, whoever it is I'm fishing with, is probably the best part of the fishing aspect of it.
How do you think you've changed or evolved over time? Because I imagine when you're young, it is very much about the fish and the fishing for you, but how have things kind of shifted over time in terms of where you derive joy?
Yeah, definitely. I have definitely evolved personally. Whereas before, when I was younger, I definitely was more like, I want to catch them. Or one of the things I notice is I struggle a lot less now if fishing's tough, either for me or for my clients. And I think that's been a big lesson that I've learned, is that, sometimes it's tough and you can actually have just as good a time on a day when the fishing is slow, when the fishing is challenging, as you can when the fishing is really good. And that is something that I have intellectually known and said for years, but it took a while for me to get to the point to where it was actually true. Like, I enjoyed the tough days, the slow days, the hard days, just as much as I enjoyed the easy days, the good days, the days where everything came together. And it is something that it's sort of like meditation. It is a practice. Like, I can get caught, in that negative mental loop where things aren't going right and I can't figure out how to make things happen, or I can't solve the problem. And I just have to remind myself on the tough days, I have to remind myself quite a bit that that's not the point of it. It's not about catching a ton of fish or just the biggest fish. It's all about the experience, the process. And I have more days where I don't have to remind myself of that than I did when I was younger. But I still do occasionally have to remind myself that it's not just about the fish. But it's definitely something that is easier now than it was, 20 years ago.
So we'll talk some more about that piece of kind of what a good day versus a bad day looks like in terms from like a client perception, or just like, hey, a harder day, not a good day, a harder day, I think is what you said.
When it comes to what looks like a good day, when you're out guiding, and it reminds me of a story that my old boss, a guy that owned the Austin Angler, one of the owners, this guy, Jim Adams, who moved to Montana and guided up there for years and really was deep in the industry and just a really good guide, just a really good all around guy. And I was fishing with him one summer in Montana and Bozeman, and we were getting the boat ready. And he told me, because I had just started guiding then, he said, so one of the most important things when it comes to having a good day on the water as a guide is, as soon as you meet your clients, you got about 15, 20 minutes. If you're riding to the river with them, you got however much time you spend in the car with them. You have to give your clients a complete psychological evaluation, figure out what it is they want from that day of fishing. And then you have the rest of the day to convince them that that is exactly what happened. So it's like you only catch 2 fish and they're all about catching a lot of fish. And somehow or another, you got to convince them that for the situation, the conditions, whatever, those 2 were a lot, So a lot of it, is really kind of, figuring out what is going to make your client happy. And really, everybody wants to catch fish. That's a given. Like, I only know a couple of people that hire guides and go fishing and really don't care whether they catch one or not. people will be okay with not catching anything, but really everybody wants to catch fish. And usually we catch fish, so, I mean, that's kind of, if you never catch fish as a guide, then, you might have a problem. But, fishless days happen to everybody. And I think a lot of my job is to just kind of make it an experience that is, that you get something out of as a client, so I can only control so much of it. And I have to be okay with not being able to control every aspect of the day. There's a really popular bumper sticker that a lot of fishing guides have, and it says guide, not God, and that's something that we not only have to remind our clients of, but we have to remind ourselves of that as well. So, things happen. There's only so much that I can control. And I think most people recognize, they'll say, fishing was tough, man, but my guide really just worked his ass off. And, he showed us a good day. We had a good time, and we'll definitely be back again. And, hopefully conditions will be better next time. And I think that's just, part of the reason, there's, if it was just about catching fish, you would go and buy a can of worms or, a chunk of frozen shrimp or whatever, and just go sit on the dock somewhere and you can catch all the fish you want. We're fly fishing because of the, for whatever reason, lots of different reasons, but, a lot of times it's because of the technique or it's because of the difficulty. We're making it hard on ourselves on purpose. So it's like you have to rise to the challenge. And I really think a lot of times those tough days, of course, everybody remembers the days where they caught a ton of fish, but a lot of times you remember those tough days almost as well or almost as long because, sometimes at some point it's like, okay, you got to laugh. It's like, all right, well, what else can not work out today? And I think that is just a lesson in life. If you can laugh at the tough times, then it's just that much sweeter when everything works in your favor.
There's so many fish and so many stories, but is there a story or two that comes to mind of just an epic day on the water?
Well, I may have told you this one before, and there's a lot of epic days on the water, but the one that always comes back lately, I lost my wife last summer, and she was, my business partner, wife, and everything, but she was also my fishing partner, and she was one of the best anglers that I know, male or female. She was really good, especially at spotting fish. And her birthday is October 18th, which is prime time for redfish fishing. And we had a day, we usually would fish on her birthday. And usually I'm working, that's prime time. So she would just come down, fish with me and go back. And this one particular time she said, I would really like to get home around 2 or 3 o'clock so that I can have a birthday party with the kids. My 3 daughters were going to be here. They were going to have cake and all that. And it's a 3-hour drive. So I'm like, well, I guess we got a few hours to do some fishing, So we get up pretty early. We get out and we hit the water, a little after sunrise. Had another boat, a couple friends of ours who were there as well. And I got it all on video. I mean, we roll up, we stop the boat. I hop up on the platform. She goes, oh, there's one. I mean, we hadn't been fishing 5 minutes. She caught that fish. And wow. For the next 3 hours, she pretty much caught every fish that she saw. I mean, it was like unbelievable. And we bailed at noon. She got home in time to have birthday cake with the kids and everything. And I mean, we lost track of how many fish she caught that day. So that's my, current and probably for a while, most epic day of fishing. I mean, yeah, I don't know how many redfish she caught, and I think that may have been our last. I think maybe we may have fished together at the coast a couple more times after that, but definitely one of the last ones, but that was definitely the best one. I mean, it was as we like to say, because like I said, we had some friends in another boat who were kind of in the general vicinity. As we like to say, she put on a clinic that day. If you were trying to figure out like how to catch redfish, watch that, because that's how you do it. So yeah, I'll never forget that day.
So what was your wife's name and how did you all meet originally?
Her name was Lene, like Renee, but with an L. And, we crossed paths a lot before we ever actually dated. I had kind of a party house. Anybody that's been to Austin or spent any time in Austin, I had like the last house on the street before you entered Zilker Park, which is where they have the big Austin City Limits Music Festival. There's a strip of bars and restaurants across the street. My only neighbor on the street, my next door neighbor, was a DJ. And so we would have these crazy parties, the party would start at midnight and go till 10 or 11 the next morning. Unless I was guiding, then I would go to sleep and everybody else would party. But she came to a party once and left her flip-flops at the pool. She came back looking for the flip-flops the next day and, knocked on the door. She didn't know who lived there. I came out and she was like, oh, but she let me know in no uncertain terms, she had no interest in me whatsoever. She was only there to retrieve her flip-flops. And, then my first year guiding in Colorado, I ran into her again. She was living in Vail with her daughter. And we had a mutual friend in town and we went to a bar and was like, oh, you're the flip-flop girl. And then she let me know again, like, yeah.
Still no.
Yeah, no. She moved back to Austin and I ran into her again and, in a bar, and I said, we just keep running into each other. You should give me your phone number. And she said, for what? And I was like, so I can call you? And she said, call me for what? And I don't know if she gave me her phone number that time or if it was a different time. But we finally were chatting on the phone and, we would meet up at places. She would never go on a date with me. But I remember I was at my mom's house, Thanksgiving, and we were chatting, laughing. And she said, oh, well, when you get back to town, we should go grab a margarita at, I can't remember exactly where. And I hung up and I told my mom, I was like, I think I got a date. And I'm like 40 something at this point. My mom goes, yeah, so what? And I was like, no, I think this may be serious. And we did. We went on one date and we were together. That was it. We were together until she passed away, like 16 years later.
Wow.
But I knew that, she was the one. But I remember like a few months later, we're in Colorado together and I took her. She didn't fly fish before we met, but she's one of those people that if she was going to do something, she had to at least be better than most people. She didn't have to be the best, but she just had to definitely be in the top 10%. So she starts fly fishing. She's all about it. And I take her to this little creek that I like to fish in on my days off. And me and my buddies would go. We'd take like a soft cooler, 12 pack of beer. And the creek was small, and we would just take turns. Like you'd fish a spot, you catch a fish or not catch a fish. Then it was your turn to carry the cooler to the next pool. So I took my wife, and so we took turns fishing pool after pool. We had a great day, caught a bunch of fish. At the end of the day, we get back to the truck. She's like, wow, that was romantic. And I was like, yes. So I was like, done deal at that point. So
like if I'd done that, I would have skipped the bars and would have gone fishing right away.
Oh yeah. We were. It was like, like the whole match made in heaven thing. And then, years later, when she decided to help me with my business, I mean, I would not be where I'm at right now if it wasn't for her. She's a genius in so many different ways. And she had been, self-employed, business owner, single mother, her whole adult life and didn't go broke. So she's brought those skills to my business. And like I said, that is the big reason that I am here right now. So,
well, let's talk about that. I mean, what was the trajectory of the business before and then after she came into the picture?
So initially, I just started the business because I was doing pretty well on my own and was getting a lot of requests that I couldn't fill, or people were wanting multiple boat trips. And, I was putting that stuff together. I had in sometime in the late 90s or maybe mid 90s, I can't remember, we got a website for the Austin Angler, the fly shop that I worked at, and we started doing an email list and an actual mailing list, which died pretty shortly after that. And I remember at one point telling my boss, Larry Sunderland, I was like, I think I want to be in charge of the email list and the website stuff and updating the website and all that. And he's like, you don't know anything about that? And I was like, no, I don't, but I sort of feel like I should know. Like, I think it's going to be important at some point in time. So he's like, go for it. So that's why when the shop closed down, he gave me the email list, and I put up my initial website, the one I still use, alvindedeaux.com. I put that site up in '01, and like I said, I didn't know anything about it, but I figured it out. I built the website. I used to, buy Google AdWords and did all the promotion and stuff myself. And I got to the point to where I was booked up. Like, I was doing as many trips as I physically could do, like way more than I would want to do now. I mean, I would work 7 days a week for weeks on end. And so I started funneling trips off to other guys and doing like these multi-boat trips. And at one point, somebody asked me like, hey, man, I'm like booking 7 boats with you. You think I could get a discount? And I was like, actually, I want to charge you more because I'm doing all the legwork and I'm getting paid the exact same amount as the 6 other guys that are going to be on the trip. So that was when I was like, yeah, I gotta do something else. And I had been spending the summers working in Colorado for several different guide services up there in the Vail area. And there wasn't really anybody doing that here. There'd been a few guide services and a few independent guides, but nobody was really like pushing a guide service in Texas. And I felt confident that I could do that and charge my guys a percentage of the daily rate. And so it was totally casual. It was the guys I'd been working with for years and said, hey, I'm going to put this together. I'm basically going to continue doing what I've been doing for the last few years, but I'm going to ask you guys to give me a cut. And they were like, yeah. I even had one guy who was like a graphic designer, had his own website and everything. And he was just like, yeah, it's a pain in the ass answering emails at night when I get off the water. If you're willing to do that, I'm willing to pay you. I mean, we had a couple of guys who had their own websites, guide businesses, solo guides. They just shut it down, because they were like, it's much easier just to pay you that percentage. So I was doing that. I was running that guide business, and I was still going to Colorado during the summer guiding there. And I mean, I was like I said, I was trying to fish every day if I could. But when I got married, start having kids, I was like, well, I need to probably stay a little closer to home. So my time in Colorado got shorter and shorter. And then as the business sort of progressed, I started making more money. And if I stayed home, I definitely made more money than if I went to Colorado for 2 or 3 months. So I gave up being a traveling guide, stayed home, and just was, really focusing on doing all water guides. My wife, meanwhile, had gone back to school and just crushed it. She got a master's degree in biology. Her area of specialty was aquatic resource management. And her big thing was, at the time, using machine learning to analyze these huge water data sets, which is, now we would call it AI, but this was more than a decade ago. She was doing some kind of, first gen AI work with these big water data sets and was a really sought after field. And I was like, yes, I'm going to retire because my wife is about to just take it to the moon. But after she did that, she just aced everything. So she was the top student of the entire department, did this crazy master's program, went and did a presentation with the Edwards Aquifer Water Authority. And 6 months later, they actually created a job at the Water Authority to do what she had done in her master's project. So I'm like, yeah, I'm on easy street now. But she needed to take a break after doing all that. And while she was taking a break, she said, I'm going to help you with your business. So she never got the real job that she trained so long.
And she ruined your retirement plans.
Yeah, she ruined my retirement plans. But actually, now I may actually be able to retire because of what she's done with the business. So she just came in, she's like a systems person and just came in and just set up all these systems, where previously I was like, if somebody called or emailed, if I got back with them in a couple of days, that was good, and she's like, no. 2 hours is the maximum we're going to sit on something, I have slipped a little bit, as you probably noticed in our correspondence trying to make this happen. I've definitely slipped a little bit since those days, but that's my goal, is to get back to that point. She's like, you don't let, people are trying to give you money. You should be jumping up with your hands out to get the money from the people, not sitting on the couch hoping they're going to throw it in your pocket, So yeah, she was just really, really aggressive about just kind of maximizing everything, making things as simple as possible. I'm still working with everything that she set up, and I just, if I could implement it, as half as well as she did, I'd definitely be sitting on easy street. But it just, that part of it was really amazing. She was really helpful with that. But also she was a really empathetic people person. So she could, like Bonner, Cassio, you fished with Bonner, or did you fish with Bonner when we were there?
I fished with both.
Yeah, so those guys are superstars. Those guys are the next, I got to get out of the way and let those guys shine because they're so good. But they wouldn't be working for us if it wasn't for Lene. She just can see people and just see oh yeah, that's somebody that we need. That guy, and she, Cassio was a high school teacher. He wasn't a guide. He was on the water. We saw him all the time, but he wasn't a guide. And she basically, was kind of stalking him on social media and then talking to him when we'd run into him on the river. And finally she was like, hey man, you ever think about being a guide? She talked, Bonner was working for a different guide service. And she was just like, hey man, you're really good, but I think, if you're over here with us, you could do a lot more, and she was right. The only guides that we've ever had to let go or stop working with were guys that I brought in. Everybody that she brought in is still with us and is still just just the best of the best. So that was also something that she contributed to the situation, which is something that I'm trying to cultivate my people skills a little bit better. She was just not good in crowds. She didn't like to be around a lot of people. I guess because she was so empathetic, she could walk into a room and feel everybody's energy. And, if there's a little bit too much negative energy in the room, it would take her down. Whereas that didn't affect me as much. I can be the center of attention. I can be on stage in front of 1,000 people and that energy feeds me. But on a one-on-one, person to person level, I'm not as good as she was. That's something I'm working on as well. But yeah, I think just being able to read people and being able to know people and encourage people. I'm much better at the encouragement. I'm pretty good at that. But she just had a lot of skills that were kind of hard to quantify that really just made a huge difference. And I think just kind of putting our business in a certain mindset and, certain like people who interact with us after a while, they're kind of like, oh yeah, that's what those guys are about. So she was really instrumental in making it more than just a group of people that took people fishing. It's like we're a group, we're like more of a family kind of scene, even though some people, I guess, just like actual families, blood families, sometimes people stick around, sometimes people have to go off and do their own thing, but it's definitely more of a family vibe. Us, the people that work here, and our clients, and that's definitely something that she cultivated.
And I'm curious, what was she, so that's the business side, like what was she like as a wife and a friend and a mom?
Well, she was a type A person. So as a wife and a mom, she was pretty strict, she trained me really well, so like we would do the thing where if one of us cooked, the other one would clean. She was so much better of a cook than I was. She cooked most of the time. And so I would clean. And initially, I thought it was okay if you clean the entire kitchen, but there were water droplets in the sink when you were done. And she was like, nah, man, I don't want to see a water droplet in my sink unless I just used my sink, So she was pretty strict, and which we have 3 daughters, and she was pretty strict with the girls, but in a totally loving way. She just was kind of like, because she had a pretty tough upbringing, like tough as in like not good, like not strict, just not good. And so she wanted to make sure that she instilled some values in the kids. You got to work hard. You don't get stuff for free. You have to keep things up to a certain standard, whether it's your bedroom, personal hygiene. Just she was kind of strict. She wanted everybody to be the best that they could be, and which is great because I'm definitely a little bit more lenient. Something that since she's gone, I'm having to kind of revisit. Like, wait a minute. And occasionally I'll tell the girls, like, if your mom was here, that wouldn't be happening. And so I do kind of lean on a lot of the stuff that she taught me, but it just eliminating as much chaos as you can, so stability, like so much of the world is not stable. But the home environment was something that she thought should be stable, predictable, the same routine day after day. And I really am trying to stick to that because it just makes life so much easier. There's just so much less stuff swirling around your head when certain things are going to be a certain way every day, day after day. So yeah, she was, it was life and business were really pretty intertwined for her. She thought that business, that home should be run like the business was run, not in a cold, uncaring way, but more in a predictable, comforting, like you know what to expect. You don't have to worry about what's going to happen because things happen a certain way day after day, So she's good. Like now I'm like going, oh, I got to work on that.
All the lessons are still there.
Yeah. Which is great. I'm glad that we're doing this because, it kind of makes me focus on some of the things that kind of, fall by the wayside because, life is completely different. We're trying to figure it out all over again, but those lessons are going to be valuable going forward. So I'm just trying to, remember.
If you're comfortable sharing, I know when we first met, I think you just lost your wife. How, and I know it was pretty sudden, like how is navigating that?
Well, it was super sudden, but the more I think about it, the more, I I'm a super skeptical guy. I'm not an atheist, but I'm not a regular religious practitioner. I'm pretty skeptical, but there was a lot of things that had happened prior to her getting sick and post losing her that have made me go, okay, you don't know everything that's going on out there. So like, let go of the skepticism. But she, like I said, it was really sudden. Like she was 10 years younger than me, and we always thought that she was going to have to bury me. And she had told me, though, like the last couple of years of her life, she decided she wasn't going to run the business anymore. She's like, this is your business. I did all this work to set you up. All you have to do is go to work. Like you're good, And so she went back to her original love, which was art. She was a seamstress. She made like these really awesome, one-of-a-kind purses and handbags. And that's how she had supported herself and her daughter for years. So she's like, I'm going to do my art. I'm out of that business. That's your business. She's like, I loved it. I loved building it up, but I'm out. And I was really happy to be like, you know what? You can do whatever you want. I can do this, even though I was like fighting, kicking and screaming, like, I don't want to be the business. I don't want to run the business. But that was really fortunate that she did that. Otherwise, like she died so suddenly that I would have really been in a bad way if I hadn't had those 2 years of kind of like easing myself back into the heart of it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think what struck me was almost how she obviously didn't know what was coming, but she completely prepared everything as a gift to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then it's like, I'm out. In terms of running the business and just set that up, man. That's beautiful.
How do you know? She said so many things. One thing that she told me when she said, I'm good, like I could die now. I'm great. But she said, you're not quite there, which used to piss me off. I mean, like, what do you mean I'm not quite there? Like, I'm like, that's a little, like, you're on a higher spiritual plane than I am, And she's like, that's not what I'm saying at all. But that is how your ego would interpret it. I'll be like, what? But one of the things she said was, you can get there. You can, whether you want to call it enlightenment or whatever. She's like, you can get there. You're capable. You're on your way. I really hope that something terrible doesn't have to happen to you for you to get there, for you to get where you need to be. And that was another one. I was like, oh my God, she said that, and then something horrible happened to me. And on the flip side, I can honestly say I've gotten a lot better, on a spiritual, emotional level, like my head is much clearer than it used to be because that happened. That was like, I can put a pin in the map and go, when that happened, my life is completely changed and it was terrible, but I am definitely a better person than I was the day before that happened. She started feeling kind of funky, like didn't really know what it was. And she'd had the same primary care physician for 20 years, regular doctor's visits, everything. And they were like, we don't know. We don't, get this test, get that test. And they finally were like, oh my God, you have cancer and it's stage 4. We're really not even sure where it started. Even when she passed, they'd never found the primary source of cancer, but it metastasized and had moved to her liver. And so we had about a month to kind of just do everything. So it was sudden, but it wasn't like a car accident sudden. And so we were able to do a lot of the stuff that has made our lives a lot easier in that month. And we both agreed that if this exact same thing would have happened maybe 3 or 5 years prior, that it would have been a total shit show. I mean, excuse my French, but that was what, we both decided because we had both had a lot of emotional, spiritual growth. She had told me probably a year or 2 years before that, like, I've done everything I want to do in my life. I am good. I can die now. I mean, she said that. And so we both were in a really, really good place. I mean, it was the peak, the best time as far as our relationship went. It was the best it had ever been. So when you have to care for someone, their last days on earth, it's something. And like maybe the best thing that she ever said to me was when she knew she was dying and when I was taking care of her, waiting on her hand and foot, very fortunate that I was able to do that. She told me, she's like, I had my doubts at times, but I know now you got my back. You got my back. And I was like, damn, all right. Okay. There's a couple of tears there. You probably can't see them, but yeah, that was one of the things that, like, I was like, okay, man, that is such a wonderful thing to hear, just to know that somebody genuinely trusts you, because, that's you can say you trust somebody or somebody can tell you that they trust you, but at that point in the game, that's about as real as it gets. And I feel extremely fortunate to have had that interaction with her. So
she made you a better person.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely, without a doubt. and I'm thankful for it. I'd go visit her. She was only in the hospital for maybe a week. I'd go visit her in the hospital. She'd have the window open and I'd be like, how's it going? She's like, oh man, I feel terrible, but look outside. The sun's shining. We're still here together. It's great, And so that was the kind of the attitude that she had all the way till the end. I mean, like I went one Friday morning and checking in on her, and I'm like, how you doing? She's like, well, I need some pain meds and I got to go home. I need to go home today. And I was like, okay. And she came home and the last thing she said to us is she's like, okay, I don't want you guys to worry about me. I am fine. And I love each and every one of you. And that was the last thing she said. She died in the middle of the night, quietly, peacefully, her bed right next to mine, and it's definitely, besides losing a kid, that's about the only thing that I could imagine that could be worse than losing your spouse. But on the flip side, it has been amazing. I mean, we have had so much love, so much support, and I just have seen so much good after that. It's like, the whole, like, there's always a silver lining if you can find it. I mean, it's just, people are amazing. And it is the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but it's probably done more to restore my faith in humanity than anything else that's ever happened, just because it's just been like, wow, we are really lucky. In spite of this terrible thing happening to us, to our family, to our extended family, like I can go out and be hanging out with a group of, big, burly, grizzly fly fishing guides, start talking about Lene, and these guys will be boo-hooing in tears, because it's just she really had a huge impact on so many people. So just seeing that just makes me realize, like, okay, we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. And that was what I told everybody from the start. Like, this is terrible. I don't know how we're going to navigate through this, but I do know we're going to make it and we're going to be happy. There is like extreme grief right now, but the future is going to bring extreme happiness. And I 100% believe that. And, that is what she would want. she told me that's what she wanted. She wanted us to be happy, be successful, continue. And so that's what we're doing. So I can smile. I could break down in tears. And I thought for a second, a few minutes ago, that I might. But I mean, I'm really, whether I'm crying or whether I'm smiling, it's pretty much all the same. Life is good. People are good. We're lucky.